Hello everybody, we are working on Unit 5 tonight on Chapter 8. Last week we completed Chapter 7. It ended up being mostly lecture in that chapter, a few little tweaks to files and mostly looking at things and understanding how they work. And this week we're going to continue that work in Chapter 8. So what I did in our unit folder is I added a zip, so whether you're online or face-to-face, you'll see right here I have chapter zips. So what I finished last week in class I placed right here as a starting point. Now I know that a few of you are maybe needing to grab my version to make sure that their version works correctly, assuming my version is correct. And that's kind of a little catch there, because it's never guaranteed to be perfect. And whenever you're grabbing somebody else's project, even if your versions of Ruby and Rails are the same, you always want to run a bundle install from the command prompt within the project to make sure that all the dependencies are loaded correctly. And hopefully all the little things will come back saying using, and then if there's one or two that need updating, it'll just do it automatically. If there's a significant version change, so if you are grabbing the source code from the book and running a bundle install on that, and that's like a couple versions old, you will run into what I basically call kind of like dependency hell, and basically what happens is, in order for one thing to work, something else needs to be fixed, and for that to work, something else needs to be fixed, and you go down this long chain of fixes that may or may not even help you. And really the best way to deal with a project like that is figure out what version it was written in the first place and just load those versions and work off of those. Now, I've been working with the same version of the software all the way through the semester, so if you're using the same versions as me that I have in the video, the bundle install should be a fairly smooth process for you. The secondary question is, if you're bringing in a project, should you do any of the rake commands? Should you run the seeds for the database, and should you run the migrations? Hypothetically, I would say no. Because if you're taking a project that's complete up until that point, all the database stuff should be embedded within the project, because the database does carry with the project. However, sometimes that does solve some problems, especially if you make changes to any of the content. So it doesn't hurt to do it. If it doesn't need to be migrated or seeded, it'll just not do it. So it won't break anything. So that's enough of a background on that stuff. So I am going to go ahead right now and jump over to the chapter. There will be some lecture-y stuff here, but we are really working on moving forward and covering the topics here. I'm going to actually expand this little menu off to the side here and just kind of look at all the different things that we're doing in Chapter 8. And I'm going to tell you what, Chapter 8 is actually probably one of the more complicated chapters that we're going to run into, and I know that a number of you have run into different issues along the way, and some of it has to do with version changes within the language and how certain commands are expressed. If you looked at any of my archive videos, and I encourage you guys to do that, because in this particular unit, if you look down at the archive videos, and please also keep in mind the years here, right? And you'll see with Chapter 8, Part 1, last year we never finished the video in class because, for whatever reason, I don't know if we had a snow day or what the deal was, but the video never got finished. So what we ended up doing, we did finish the work in class, but I just basically deferred people to what was happening in the previous year, and that's okay because it's still basically all the same work. And there is a weird little problem that a lot of people are having that probably won't figure out unless they actually look at this little short video here that has the fix. That might be the fix that's making you stick in Chapter 8. Now, your problem might be something completely different, and I've gotten emails probably from about 4 or 5 people, and out of a class of about 13, I think it is, or 14, that's a pretty high percentage. But you know what? That's pretty par for the course for this chapter. As I'm going through the PDF that I have here, I will have notes in the margins and stuff that we're going to pay attention to, because I update those every time I do this. And no guarantees that everything's going to work perfectly, and there's basically the technique is, what's the problem, how do we get around it, how do we make this work, right? And that really is what you do in the real world. So if you think that we're kind of walking a path where we're not getting anywhere. I'm going to assure you that's not the case. The process of solving a problem that's frustrating is the point. Just remember that. All right. So here we go. All right. So we learned a little bit about Action Pack in the previous chapter and some of the things that it does. And in this chapter, we're going to continue that work. And the first thing that we're going to learn how to do again is to generate another controller. But let's think about what a controller actually does here in terms of what it does for our application. When we are working in an MVC architecture and we have the MVC and the C being the controller is kind of like the gatekeeper of what's coming in from the browser as a request. Remember, the user types in a URL or clicks on something, and then it'll come back with a clean URL, but it's really triggering some sort of action within the application. And when you do the generate controller command, you have to notice that you have Rails generate controller, so that's like the core of the command. And then you name your controller, and then you have certain things that you can also throw at it. So the actions would actually equate to methods that are within the application, and the options would be the parameters that are sent to those methods or that controller. So it's really kind of a way to both manipulate the code from your browser URL, and that's really kind of a neat concept conceptually. A lot of content management systems do operate just that way. The first command that we're going to run here is Rails generate controller users. So I'm going to copy that and bring up my prompt. I'm going to drop down to the root, change into the projects folder, and CD to my blog folder. Preemptively, prior to starting, I did make a backup copy of Chapter 7 complete. I also zipped it and put it into the core shell. So I have that safety net. Remember, please remember to do that when you're working on your own. This is a complicated technology, and when you start to mess things up, you need that safety net. You need a way to go back. Don't put yourself in the position where you don't have that. Now, it shouldn't just be at the end of the chapter. In fact, you'll probably see as I'm going through this chapter and I go through some successful steps, I'll probably stop and back up and zip, or maybe not even zip, but at least make a backup copy while in progress. As long as the files are saved, it's not a big deal, and that way I don't have to go back 20 pages. I might have to just go back to 5. All right, so here we are. Let's drop that command in. Yes, John?
Okay, so I did bundle install, and I got that the version of the bundler is older than the version that created the lock file.
So I have a question. Somebody is trying to grab my code and drop it, and you're using the VDI to do your work?
Okay.
Okay. You are going to run into a problem, but I have a fix for you. If you are using the VDI to do your work, you don't want to use my current code. You want to use my old code.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you a copy of my old code because I still have it.
All right.
Just in case the video people want to know. All right, so we took a little time to answer a question and transfer some files, which we're still working on. But I was going back to our command now. So Rails generate controller users. So I'm pressing enter. At least I think I pressed enter. Apparently I hadn't. So now it's doing it. All right. So you can see all the files that it created. So we had a users controller file. We also are creating test controllers as well. It also built a helper app automatically for it. And then notice down here, and this is something we're going to talk about in the subsequent chapter, and it's one of those things that you guys as web developers are a couple of technologies you want to start looking at and exploring on your own, because we really don't formally teach them in the program. We talk about them a little bit in some classes, but you should be aware of these two technologies. One is a technology called CoffeeScript, which is related to JavaScript, and basically it's a way to kind of write JavaScript in a simplified fashion. And very much in the same sense, we have a technology called SCSS, which is basically, I think it stands for Simplified CSS. And what it is, it's a simpler way to write CSS. Now, when the application runs and compiles, your simplified commands then become compiled and turned into regular JavaScript and regular CSS. And some people go, what's the point, right? Well, the point is that if you're a developer that's working really quick, you don't have to sit there and memorize certain types of syntax, and once you look at those files, you'll see that there's the capability basically of writing some really quick, simple little codes that you can probably just guess at and then get things to work. All right, so something to pay attention to. But assets, notice that we're actually creating a separate JavaScript file and a separate CSS file just for the user's controller, and really kind of for all the user pages. So keep that in mind. We're generating a controller here. Notice no model was created, no view was created. We're just generating a controller. Okay, so that was the point there. All right. Next thing they want us to do is they want us to go take a look at this file. So in the app controller, users controllers RB file, you're going to find something that's empty, but we're going to add some code to it. So let's go find it first. I suppose I need a file window open. And hopefully you guys know where you store your stuff. If you're following along with me, it's in the root. And this was in app controllers users controller. So app controllers users controller, and then open it up with your text editor. I'm going to give it a little bit of a zoom here. All right, next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop my cursor in here, make a little bit of space because I know we want edits. And I'm not sure if I've really talked about this a lot while I've made these videos this semester, but you'll notice that the author does have links to GitHub right inside of the book here. And if you happen to click on that, it will take you to the code on his GitHub page, and you can actually copy the code from here. Now, something that's interesting is some of the conversations that go with this, because sometimes people find problems and then they also post fixes that are more current than what's shown in the errata for the book, and sometimes alternate ways to do things. So something just to keep in mind as we're working. And sometimes when I run into problems, and I know that this chapter has been problematic for people, that's one resource I go and look at, because if somebody, either the author or some user, figured out a way to fix something because of version change or whatever happens, I mean, there's really no better resource than to find other people that are working on the same stuff and have found workarounds for certain things. All right, now whatever method you guys use to do your copy pasting and moving of the code, please proceed and do that. If you notice that this file actually covers a couple pages, and so I'm going to just copy it in pieces. I'm going to grab this section first, and then I'm going to be mindful of my indents as well as I'm doing it. So why don't I split screen myself here with the book, and that way I'll know what the indents should look like. That's all on one line. I love it that an if-else is an if-else no matter what language it is, right? All right, so now I'm on to the second page here. This is right now an empty method, the edit method. The update method does have some stuff. And then if you guys are noticing here the pattern, once again, and this is one of the important things here, because you are going to see this pattern repeat in any MVC architecture you're working within. So regardless of the language or the application that your development tool that you're using, what we're most typically seeing with a controller is the fact that it's accommodating for all the standard CRUD operations that we do with a database. Create, retrieve, update, and destroy. So you create something new, right? Create, you might edit it, you might update it, and then often you also delete. Now notice there is no action built in for delete right now, but that's something that can be rectified if necessary. Alright, and I think I'm ready to save. I'm just doing a double check here to see that everything's still okay. I'm just zooming out a little bit. And that all looks alright to me. So I'm going to go ahead and hit my save button here. Alright, next thing we're going to go look at is we're going to go to the views folder now. So we're going to go to app, views, users, new HTML. So let's go find it first. And what do we see? It's empty. Now why? This is the first problem you guys are running into, right? So what should I do? Should I like abort?
No.
What should I do?
If it's new, then can you create it?
Why, yes, let's create it. Now, here's the illusion, though, and this is, I think, one of the confusions that people were having, right? So the author says you add 4 actions, yada, 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 yada. The main difference is that you're using the respond to block. Therefore, Rails directly renders and here's the thing. Rails directly renders the default ERB templates. But guess what didn't happen? It didn't do that. Does that mean that we cannot create those files? Absolutely you can create those files. So there's been some sort of a difference in how the commands are executing certain subsequent commands. So our task here is to actually create this. And this is pretty simple. These are just text files. So I'm just going to come to my editor here, create new. First thing I'm going to do is a save as. That should be a habit you guys get into. Where should it be? Views, users. So let's go up to views, users, and this is going to be called new.html.erb. What is our code? Well, we're using a combination of standard HTML and a couple of ASP style tags. And notice the form of the tags here. Notice that this one has an equal sign with it. So that means that something's going to be pushed back to the browser here. So what are we going to render? The form. What form? Well, some form somewhere, right? Obviously. And then we also are going to provide a link to where? Back, and then the path to the articles where we came from. All right, so go ahead and save that one. Then we're going to create another new file, and this one's called edit.html.erb. Do your save as right away. It should be in the same folder. So app views users, and this one was called edit.html.erb. Once again, very, very simple little commands we're dropping in here. Basically the same thing. So really, if you look at this as a file, right? It's not a complete HTML file. It's a portion of a page, and all it's doing is it's putting up a heading. It's pulling in the form, which allows us to interact with all the article features, or user features, or whatever thing that's pulling up. and then it provides a link back to where we came from. All right. Another one that we need to create here. Another new one. Once again, a save as. And this one starts with an underscore, and this is a form partial. So whenever you see that underscore first, it refers to the fact that it's a partial component. So underscore form.html.erb. And I'm going to copy that whole darn thing. And then start to do some indents. That's all on one line. Got some ULs going on here. And then I am looking at the stuff on the left here as a guide. And at the level of indent, I'm not really matching here too well, am I? Now, question, does it matter? Not really. Not with these files. Not what you want to hear, right? Say that one more time, John.
Is that all that in a hole and you copy and paste it in the file?
No. I think actually the funny thing is if I would have copied this from GitHub, it probably would have came in clean, because the tool there, I think, is set up for it. We're grabbing from a PDF, which isn't really the cleanest way to do it in the first place. Could I just leave it as it was? Yeah, I could. All right. Go ahead and save your work, folks, once you're done. And then from there, I'm going to go on to the next file, because we got really basically one more edit to do here. And this is in the routes RB file. So this is in a different location. So under config routes. So let's open up our project folder, config, routes, and then here we're just going to add another resource for users. Just like that. And then I'm going to save it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pause right now and let you guys catch up to me, because I know I was probably kind of racing ahead a little bit. And then once you guys are all there, we'll move on. Alright, so while people are catching up here, I'm going to go ahead and load up a second command prompt. I have one already open, but I'd like another one. So type cmd and drop down to the root, into project, into blog, and then I'm going to go ahead and run the Rails server. So I basically just brought up this prompt to just run the server so that I can test the application. I'm going to actually go ahead and pull this server log off to my second screen, which will just keep continuously running. And then I'm going to go ahead and actually click on the link here to bring the application up in the browser. Always remember, on first launch, the web server is a little slow. So usually the very first page you load takes a little while. Okay. I'm not sure why that is, probably just because everything is initializing and loading into memory and whatever it has to do. Alright, so there's our thing. Now, the thing that I'm going to point out here, and this is basically what we just built. We built a controller. So the controller called users is triggered by the URL that we have here. So localhost takes us to the root of the application, but if I type in users and add it to the URL, it finds the controller called users. From there, it's waiting for some sort of action within users to be taken, and in this case they're calling new. So to kind of follow that as a pathway by looking at code, I launch the application and it brings up the users controller, and then we look at the additional part of the URL, which is new, and it goes through the application and finds the method or function or whatever you want to call it, called new. And then what does that do? It instantiates basically in memory a new user, okay, provided you actually click the create button, and it will do that. Now, view-wise, what happens when I click new? So notice how we got new.html here, .erb. This is what we're seeing on the screen. So the new user, the form, well, this is the form that goes with it for user, and a link back. And does the link work? It does. Now, I'm not sure what action particularly you want to take in the book here, but I think that for the most part, they just want you to be able to get this up on the screen. But notice what they say. They say when you try to create a user, you should receive an error message. So let's try it, right? Oh, wait, I lost my URL. How do I get back? Well, I don't have a link to it in a menu or something, but I can still type user new. It's users. Okay, of course it is. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, red stuff on the screen. Not good. Okay, new users new. All right, let's go ahead and try to create one. Right, and it does give the forbidden attributes error, and it does explain in the book why that's actually happening. So it's not going to work at this point, and that's not something we're really too worried about it. Now, if you want to understand why it says what happened, if you recall back in 7 when the scaffold generated articles controller for us, it was very specific about what parameters should and shouldn't be sent. In our controller, we're passing parameters into it. We need to specify which are acceptable so nefarious users can't hack our system. So what we're going to do is we're going to modify the user params method inside the user's controller to look like this. Now, this is one of those weird things where if you're doing this on your own and you're working ahead, this is an easy one to miss. And maybe you didn't, maybe you did, but let's go ahead and do exactly that. So we're going to find users controllers. Here's the user params. Notice the user params are missing, right? And we are going to replace those with something very specific. So we're going to require user, right? Well, if you're going to create a new user, you better have a user. And then we're also going to permit email and password confirmation. Go ahead and do a save. It says run the server again and retry the user creation. Now, even though the server is already running, you don't have to stop it, folks. You should actually be able to go back and run it. And okay, I typed in something that was too short, but I was able to actually do the work. It's actually behaving now. So let me just put in a password that is inappropriate, like password. I mean, if you're following along, you may as well know what the password is, especially if you're using my code. So now we created a new user. How can I be sure? Bring up your SQLite browser. I'm not in the habit of doing that, and you'll see why this tool is so handy that way, because it just gives you peace of mind, basically. All right, and here's the user I just created, and my hash password. All right, let's jump back over to our textbook now. Let's see what our next steps are. All right, I'm going to bring up my text editor here on the right, And looks like we have to add a couple of additional things here. So we're going to go back to our routes file. And now notice what we're doing here. And this is kind of interesting because we already have resources for articles present in our file. But what we're doing here is we're adding a do statement to it, which is kind of an odd thing, especially when you come from other languages. What does that imply to you when I put a do next to a statement? Okay, I'm hoping it makes your brain go, oh, this must be a do-while loop, right? And that's basically what it is. So this is a way to do a while loop. So we're setting up a loop here, and then our resources will be comments. Now, if you think about how a blog works, and the fact that when you make an article for a blog, your comments might be one, none, or many, right? So the reason you set up a loop is what we're saying here is for articles, every time we have the resource of an article, we also are going to loop through and pull in all the comments. And this basically helps us pull that path in automatically. So whenever we're pulling up an article, it's going to pull in the comments that come with it. Now they have a little table here that's kind of interesting, and it shows if you are putting in these different resources, and this is, I don't know if you guys remember this, this looks really similar to what we saw in the previous chapter with all the different HTTP commands on the left, ones that you typically don't see or invoke, but are happening in the background, and then what the results and the parameters are that go with it. And then notice how they basically all correspond with database actions, and that is not by accident, it is by design. So at this point we are going to go back to our standard prompt now, and we have some commands to run, or at least one command to run before we have to do some more edits. And here we are going to generate another controller, and this controller is for comments. So we're going to just generate a controller called comments, and it's going to do very much the same thing we just did with users. It's going to give us a code file that's going to allow us to basically route traffic when the URL has the word comments at the end of it. You can see that in this case, and this is kind of interesting, how with the users it did not automatically create any views, or did it? Oh no, it created the folder. Okay, so it just created the folder, but it didn't create any of the files. So we got the same situation here as we did previously, and basically the same set of resources. So you got the controller, you got the template files, those are the ERBs, you got the test files if you're doing test-driven development, you got any helpers that need to come with it, and then you have your JavaScript and CSS resources. Yes, every controller gets its own JavaScript and its own CSS. Why? Separation of concerns, easier editing, maybe a more complicated file system, but it only loads the pieces it needs when it needs them. All right, and then we're going to move on to our editor here, and at this point we need to go back to the controllers, comments controllers, not going back to it, we're opening it for the first time actually. So let's go there. So blog, apps, controllers, comments controller, and then open it up. We are going to have to copy in all this code and do a little cleanup, so I'm going to get started on that task. And you know, I'm going to try something a little different here with my copy paste, and that is I'm going to try the copy with formatting and see if it brings the spacing over. That would be kind of interesting if it did. Of course not. And that's because Acrobat seemed to be a little locked up there. Let's try that again. Right click, copy with formatting, and paste. No such luck. So I'm going to have to go in here and do a little manual editing. Not a big deal. I suppose better than typing it all from scratch. Yeah, and I'm just looking at my code here going, oh my god, that doesn't look the same. What's happening? Oh, I see what's happening. See, the else's are here. So it should look like that. And I'm sure there's probably some of you at home going, hey, what are you doing? And then we have our private section down here. And one thing I'll have you notice as we're putting this one together, why does the comments controller automatically require comment and permit name, email, and body? How does it know to do that? Where is it pulling up that information from? And why didn't the users do that automatically? It's kind of an interesting thought, isn't it? The answer to that is because of the structure of the application. Because in our database structure, in our model structure, we already have connections from the comments to the articles. That's why that gets forged in there and added automatically. All right, so if you've got those changes done, go ahead and save. If you look at, what these things are doing, and you can logic through it by both reading the book and I guess listening to what I'm saying about it. Once again, we have our controller, and then we have things for create and destroy. What else would you do with a comment? Would you want to edit a comment? Let's think about that. Well, maybe as an application developer, you might want the ability to maybe go in there and remove somebody's bad words. But if you're really, think about the logic here is like somebody makes a comment, you really shouldn't be able to go in and edit it, right? At least not a regular user. Of course, if you're an admin on the system or a person creating the application, you can always go into the database where the user can't. So if they put something in there that's nasty, you can go right into the database entry and fix the comment or remove the swear word or the political affiliation or whatever the case may be. Make sure your work is saved before you move on. Next, we're going to go into our views folder. So back to app, views, and show, articles, yes, articles. I'm bringing up the show file. All right. Now, there's already a lot of stuff inside here, but what we're going to do at this point is we are going to adjust this a little bit. And notice, it's not a mistake to get rid of stuff. It says that's a lot of cleaning. All right, so we are still working on this. So don't freak out to the fact that we're changing a lot of stuff. But this is what is going to be inside the file. Do I need to clean this up any more than what I have already? Not really. I do indents to make your life a little clearer, or breaks, or whatever makes you happy. Just do it. All right. Now, some of the stuff that we're pulling out, what you should be asking yourself, like if you're thinking in a logical fashion, it's like, why am I pulling all that stuff out? Right? Because basically what we're going to do in the next step is we are going to take some of the stuff that was already there and move it to a different spot. So watch what happens in this next file. So we're going to go to Views, Layouts. Let's bring up the thing, Views, Layouts, and then we're going to Application HTML ERB, which is this file here. All right. Our job here is now basically to add this content in the body section. Notice the removal of yield.
No, you'll go there.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. You're right. Nothing like students to make you look like a fool, huh? Thanks, students. There go your A's. All right.
You were just seeing if you were paying attention.
Yeah, I was just seeing if you were paying. That's correct. I was seeing if you were paying attention. So I'm going ahead and saving.
I was trying to get you guys to
All right, so we threw in our stuff there. So make sure that you're all matched up and make sure that you're saved. Next thing that we're going to do is now we're going to go up to the articles folder, still within views, and we're going to open up the article partial. Now this is kind of interesting. All right, am I doing the right thing? So ask yourself. And it says article partial in, but I don't have that file. Am I doing something wrong? No, let's create it. So let's go ahead and create a new file. Let's do a save as. Make sure it ends up in that folder. So we're going to go up to views, articles, and create underscore article .html.erb. Save it. And then we're going to start to copy over this code. This spans 2 pages, so I'm going to do it in pieces. And then do a little cleanup here. That looks pretty good right there. I'll go ahead and save. Now for some of you, I know that when I was going through emails and kind of contending with problems, I had a couple people that were talking about this div 4 thing. Okay, and for right now, I'm proceeding bravely ahead. Now, with the thing in the back of my head telling me that I might have a problem here. Okay, so totally in anticipation of this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and make that edit and save it. Then we're going to go back and create this additional file. I'm also going to make sure that it doesn't already exist. So I'm going to go to views, comments. Do I even have that there? No, I don't. I guess I could just copy the file name right from here. So I'll go ahead and create a new one. Save as, always the first thing you should do. Back up to views, comments, and then a comment partial is what this is. And then we're going to copy in this code. And once again, the cleanup. And then this line here, line 5 and 6 should all be on one line. Be mindful of that, because that can mess you up. And for some of you, I would bet that may have been the problem that you were having in this section. So this line here was split over 2 lines, and that's because of the copy paste. So I made sure it was all on one line. Control S to save. All right, and then we're moving on to the next file. And after I do the edits on this one, I mean, I do have, I guess I have that one and this one left to do. So I'll do both of those, and then it looks like they want us back at the browser, and then we'll take a break here in class because we're about at the halfway point. All right, so the next one is appviewcomments new. All right, and that's a brand new file, so just go ahead and create it. Save as. Should be in the right folder already. And this one is new.html.erb. And you can see we're creating a new form here. And save. All right. Now we're moving on to this file. So, and basically what's happening here is they're telling us that the delete portion changed, so we need to alter our application to make sure that it matches up. So underneath the span that's got a class of actions, we're going to change the code inside here, being mindful of the fact this is all one line of code and needs to end up that way. So I'm going to replace this piece, paste this in, and then also make sure they're on the same line. And then save. All right. So here I'm going to go ahead and go back to my application now, which should still be running in the window, right? And what is it they want us to do here? They want us to run the server, go to your browser, click your way through to an article, and you should see something very similar to this. So I just happen to have the page of articles here. I'm just going to refresh it just to make sure. Okay, so it's up. And then I'm going to, well, I got this article here. Let's go ahead and show it. Look at all that progress. Oh, no. This is a great time for a break, folks. I planned it this way, you know. Yeah, we are going to take a break here in class, and now I'm actually going to stop this video here, and I'll start a fresh one. We'll come back and hopefully fix this problem. So I'll see you in part 2.